Welcome, and thank you all for joining the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division as we go over the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, Local Educational Agency, LEA, Maintenance of Effort presentation. Here is our standard disclaimer. This presentation and slide deck represent TEA's interpretation of federal laws and guidance pertaining to ESSA LEA MOE. However, it's important to note that this guidance does not constitute legal advice. LEAs are strongly advised to seek legal counsel before taking any actions based on the information and guidance provided in this presentation. Our agenda will cover: what is ESSA LEA MOE? How does an LEA demonstrate compliance? What are the consequences of non-compliance? What is ESSA LEA MOE? Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, Maintenance of Effort, requires local educational agencies, LEAs, to maintain their state and local expenditures at a specified level from one fiscal year to the next. Under Section 8521A, DEA, as a state education agency for Texas, is required to determine whether an LEA's combined fiscal effort per student, or the aggregate expenditures for the preceding fiscal year, was at least 90% of the combined fiscal effort of aggregate expenditures for the second preceding fiscal year. In other words, to receive funds under a covered program, an LEA must maintain a minimum of 90% of its expenditures for public education from state and local funds from one year to the next. If the percentage of state and local funds expended in the year under determination is less than 90% of what was expended in the prior fiscal year, the LEA's ESSA allocations for the upcoming fiscal year will be reduced in the exact proportion by which the LEA did not meet the MOE requirement. To meet the ESSA LEA MOE requirement in any fiscal year, an LEA is required to expend state and local funds at a minimum of 90% of the level at which it expended funds in the preceding fiscal year. There are 4 calculations for determining whether an LEA has met the ESSA LEA MOE requirement. An LEA needs to meet at least one of the following 4 tests to be compliant. 1. Total state and local expenditures. The LEA's total state and local expenditures must equal or exceed 90% of expenditures during the previous fiscal year. 2. Total state and local expenditures per pupil for refined average daily attendance, RADA, R-A-D-A. The RADA per pupil amount the LEA expended must equal or exceed 90% of the amount it expended during the previous fiscal year. 3. Total state and local expenditures per pupil for membership. The membership per pupil amount the LEA expended must equal or exceed 90% of what it expended during the previous fiscal year. 4. Total state and local expenditures per pupil for enrollment. The enrollment per pupil amount the LEA expended must equal or exceed 90% of what it expended during the previous fiscal year. Included within ESSA LEA MOE are the following fund codes: General Fund 199, and Foundation School Program and Other State Aid used by charter schools only, Fund 420. It's important to note that all federal funds, including ESSER 1, 2, and 3, are excluded from the calculation. Per Title 34 of the Code of Federal Regulations, 34 CFR, Part 299.5, Subpart D, in determining an LEA's compliance with ESSA LEA MOE, the following total state and local expenditures expended for the functions listed below are included in the ESSA LEA MOE calculation. These include expenditures for administration, instruction, attendance and health services, pupil transportation services, operation and maintenance of plant, fixed charges, and net expenditures to cover deficits for food services and student body activities, and debt services, Only Object Code 6512, 6514, 6522, and 6526 related to principal and/or interest for long-term leases and interest on subscription-based information technology arrangement liabilities. Please note, Object Code 6514 and 6526 will be included for the first time in the FY23 calculation completed in the spring of 2024. TEA may not consider any expenditures for community services, capital outlay, debt service or supplemental expenses made because of a presidentially declared disaster, or any expenditures made from funds provided by the federal government. Therefore, state and local expenditures expended for the functions and object codes listed below are excluded from the ESSA LEA MOE calculation. As a reminder, Object Codes 6514 and 6526 will be included in the FY23 calculation for spring of 2024. The LEA may meet ESSA LEA MOE requirements if its fiscal effort per student is maintained at a minimum of 90% of what it expended during the previous fiscal year. Fiscal effort per student is calculated by dividing total state and local expenditures by the LEA student count. Student count may be calculated based on RADA, membership, or enrollment as follows. RADA, the aggregate eligible days of student attendance, is divided by the number of days of instruction to compute RADA. LEAs may find RADA in the reports posted by school year on the average daily attendance and wealth per average daily attendance page of the TEA website. Note, House Bill 2442's provision for minutes of operation will not change the MOE calculation, as TEA will convert minutes into the traditional ADA format for each LEA in the posted reports. Membership, the number of students actually receiving instruction by attendance in a public school, as opposed to being registered but not yet receiving instruction, minus the number of students who are served for fewer than 2 hours per day. This count is derived by taking the LEA's total enrollment figure found on the TSDS PEAMS report, PDM 1 230-003, student summary by sex and ethnicity, and subtracting the student count on row 0, eligibility code. Enrollment. In enrollment, the number of students actually receiving instruction by attendance in a public school as opposed to being registered but not yet receiving instruction. The LEA's enrollment figure is included on the TSDS PEAMS report PDM 1 230-003, student summary by sex and ethnicity. In this report, the total student count indicated is the enrollment count. Per section 8521B, 1, if the LEA fails to meet all 4 tests listed on slide 5, and if the LEA failed to meet the requirement in 1 or more of the 5 immediately preceding fiscal years, TEA is required to reduce the amount of funds allocated under ESSA-covered programs, listed below, in exact proportion to the LEA's failure to meet the requirement using the test that is most favorable to the LEA. It is important to note the preceding fiscal year is simply the fiscal year before the fiscal year in which Title I funds are available to the LEA, and the fiscal year for which TEA will determine the LEA's compliance. The second preceding fiscal year is the fiscal year before the preceding fiscal year. Therefore, to determine MOE compliance for fiscal year 2023, for example, TEA will compare the LEA state and local expenditure amount for fiscal year 2023 to the LEA state and local expenditure amount for fiscal year 2022. The next couple of slides, we will go over examples of a compliant and non-compliant LEA. Here's an example of a compliant LEA. Column A lists the 4 ESSA MOE tests. Column B represents the FY21 state and local expenditures, which serves as a baseline comparison. Column C indicates the level required to maintain effort in FY22 set at 90% of the FY21 expenditure level. Column D displays the FY22 state and local expenditures, representing the LEA's actual spending for FY22. Column E reflects the amount LEA failed to maintain effort in FY22, calculated as the difference between column C and D. Column F illustrates the percent allocation reduced in FY24, calculated by dividing the amount the LEA failed to maintain effort in FY22 by column C. Because this LEA maintained at least 90% of effort in FY22 in comparison to FY21, this LEA is compliant for FY24. In this example, we will see where an LEA is non-compliant. Just like in our previous slide, the chart demonstrates the same column and row titles. As you can see in column D, the LEA did not expend the level required to maintain effort in FY22 because the amounts expended were less than column C, which is the 90% minimum requirement for ESSA LEA MOE. Therefore, in column E, you will see the amount the LEA failed to maintain effort, column C minus D. Column F illustrates the percentage of allocation reduced in FY24, column E divided by C. Since this LEA is non-compliant, TEA must reduce the amount of funds allocated under ESSA covered programs in exact proportion to the LEA's failure to meet the requirement, using the test that is most favorable to the LEA. In this case, ESSA MOE Test 1, total state and local expenditures with the allocation reduction percentage of 8.135% would be the most favorable reduction for this LEA. Here is a snippet of the ESSA LEA MOE webpage that can be found on the TEA website. On this webpage, we have provided various resources and information regarding ESSA LEA MOE. A great resource we have in this section is the ESSA LEA MOE Handbook. You can review this handbook by clicking on the link in the ESSA webpage, or we have made this PowerPoint accessible where you can click on the ESSA LEA MOE Handbook title on the bottom left of this slide and it will take you directly to the handbook. In addition, if you hover over the snippet of the ESSA LEA MOE webpage graphic in this slide, it will take you to the ESSA LEA MOE webpage. Continuing with the resources on the ESSA LEA MOE webpage, you will find the ESSA LEA MOE calculation tool and the federal guidance section that provides the federal regulations concerning ESSA LEA MOE. In addition, we have provided an accessible link in this PowerPoint where you can click on the ESSA LEA MOE calculation tool title on the left-hand side of this slide and it will open the calculation tool. In the same manner, if you click non-regulatory guidance, it will take you directly to the website for non-regulatory guidance. Here is a snippet of the calculation tool that can be found on the ESSA webpage, provided in both Excel and PDF formats. This tool is designed to facilitate the initial determination of a local educational agency's LEA's compliance with the maintenance of effort requirement for programs funded pursuant to the Every Student Succeeds Act. It is intended for planning purposes only. The final determination of an LEA's compliance with the ESSA MOE requirements shall be made by the TEA's Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division. LEAs may enter information in the yellow highlighted columns and rows. The tool automatically calculates amounts for lines 16, 18, 20, 22, and 23. Please note, this tool works only if there is no gap between comparison year and determination year. Once the LEA's data is fully entered, the tool will provide a status of compliance and indicate any potential reductions in fiscal year allocations. This tool can serve as a helpful guide for comparison purposes until final ESSA LEA MOE reports are available from TEA. Under Section 8521B(1), TEA is required to reduce allocations for ESSA-covered programs for LEAs that have failed to meet MOE for one or more of the 5 immediately preceding fiscal years. For example, if an LEA is found non-compliant for FY 2022, TEA will look back to FY 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, the 5 preceding fiscal years, to determine if the LEA failed in any of those 5 years. If the LEA is non-compliant in any of those 5 preceding years, then the LEA's next allocations for the covered programs will be reduced. If the LEA is compliant in all of those 5 preceding years, then the LEA's next allocations for the covered programs will not be reduced. In this example, the LEA is not subject to sanctions for failing ESSA LEA MOE in FY 2022. ESSA Section 8521 Part C, an LEA may request a USDE waiver if the LEA did not meet the compliance standard due to one or both of the following: exceptional or uncontrollable circumstances, such as a natural disaster or a change in the organizational structure of the LEA, a precipitous decline in the financial resources of the LEA. It is important to note that TEA has no authority to waive the ESSA LEA MOE requirement and has no input into USDE's decision regarding LEA waiver requests. If USDE grants the LEA's request for a waiver, USDE will notify TEA, and TEA staff will notify the LEA. The LEA may then receive its full allocation for Title I Part A and other covered ESSA programs for the applicable fiscal year. If an LEA receives an approved USDE waiver of the MOE requirement for a given fiscal year, the LEA has effectively maintained effort for that fiscal year. Accordingly, in determining whether the LEA had failed to maintain effort for one or more of the 5 immediately preceding fiscal years, TEA would count the year in which the LEA received a USDE waiver as a year of maintaining effort. However, an approved USDE waiver does not eliminate the MOE requirement or authorize the LEA to not maintain effort in future years. During the spring 2024, TEA will be reviewing the fiscal year 2023, school year 2022-2023 data for ESSA LEA MOE. The fiscal year 2023 data will be compared to the fiscal year 2022 data. This data comparison will determine the funding impact for fiscal year 2025 if the LEA is non-compliant. The timeline below follows the same in previous years. Thank you for your time during this presentation. Our team is always happy to assist with any questions you may have. For any questions, please reach out to the compliance team at compliance@tea.texas.gov.